5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, Jessica, and welcome to the Make Life Rich Movement podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
Everyone, I think there comes a time where you may find yourself really lost for support. And in those times, there are often really scary, unexpected moments that not many go through, and if they do go through, it's not really a topic that's kind of shared too much. And Jessica is one of those individuals that I believe puts her heart on her sleeve to help others in their absolute worst moments by sharing her story. And Jessica, you have the beautiful, beautiful focus of being a certified child life specialist, as well as a children's book author, and you focus on the topics of loss, grief, and ways to support children and families during these extremely tumultuous, transitionary periods in their life. Thank you so much for the work you're doing and the help that you're providing to families and supporting children going through grief. And just thank you so much for taking your pain and turning it into purpose and just running with that passion, because my goodness, you've been very busy over the last 8 years of this focus and effort. And I'm just so thankful to hear your story and to share it today.
Yeah, thank you. It really is such a privilege to be able to take my story and do good in the world and help others who are going through these really awful times.
It's certainly a topic that I think a lot of people really struggle with, in the taboo nature of, do we address the elephant in the room, or do we just let everything kind of keep, until grief hits your doorstep? I think a lot of people don't really know where to start. And I think starting in childhood is probably a pretty great place to
It's the
begin these
best place.
conversations. I'm 39. I feel like my generation just absolutely did not have those kinds of conversations until the moment was upon you. And I feel grateful now to be seeing such swift change within the conversations that we have with our children and the ways in which we speak with the young people in our life to not only support them, but to better prepare them for what may come
Yeah.
ahead. And I would love to know, I guess, what was your earliest experience or your earliest memory of grief or loss, or just
Mhm.
kind of recognizing the permanence of death?
Yeah. So there are a couple that come to mind. I think the very first grief situation that I can recall was the death of my dog when I was in fourth grade, fifth grade. I remember, I was so close to this dog. I literally grew up with her. She was a little bit less than a year younger than I was. So we have pictures of the two of us taking naps together in her crate. So we literally grew up together. I mean, she was my like comfort, and it was so hard grieving that loss. And to your point of, we didn't really talk about it in our generation. I It was in a way a little bit swept under the rug, and it was very surprising to me to see some of the emotions coming out within my family. Just, that time going to the vets and realizing that she was going to die. It was the first time I had ever seen my dad cry, which was very shocking to me as a 9-year-old girl. Wow, I've never seen my dad cry. Why is he crying? What is going on? All of these big thoughts and questions floating through my mind. And I feel like we didn't really talk about it a whole lot after that happened. We soon got another dog, and I internalized a lot of my own thoughts and emotions because it wasn't really talked about a lot in our family. It's a different time now than when we were going through these losses. There's another. I'll just share briefly my first experience with death of a human close to me was a great grandparent, and I remember needing to take a day or two off of school to attend the funeral. And my gym teacher at the time asked who it was who died, and I shared it was my great grandparent. They asked me how old they were. I said, I don't know, I think she was in her late 80s, early 90s. And the immediate response that I got from that teacher was, at least they lived a long life. And I was like, but that is not helpful at all. Like the whole at least statement, it crushed me. I was grieving. I was sad. I didn't, I mean, I only had, I don't know, maybe 11, 12 years with this person. That wasn't enough time for me to have with my family member. It didn't matter that they were in their 80s or 90s. It wasn't enough time for me.
Yeah.
So I remember that being something that really impacted me. And, still to this day, 20 something years later, I still remember that one statement from that teacher.
It's so interesting. I think we kind of grew up in the tail end of the emotional dark ages of sorts, and I think now it's one of those situations where over time it does seem as though empathy is injected into the thought process of another before responding, whether or not they're happy to do that or they're like, "Oh, wait, I let me not be gruff about this. Like, how can I be a little bit kinder in my response?" And it's so interesting to see now the changes in the way that we discuss things. And I remember there being a moment where I was younger and kind of just questioning, like, when do adults feel pain? Where do they go? Like, you never would see it. Even, I think when we were younger, there was a connotation of men needing to be strong and you don't cry, and that I
Mhm.
can understand. And thankfully, that's starting to wane in its like pervasiveness. But it also struck me that you didn't really see adult women cry either. And there weren't really too many situations where you saw a lot of adults crying all at one time, which I think would probably be pretty concerning to a child to see a lot of adults all crying at one time for the first time, which likely would happen at a funeral. So, where do you see, as an expert of understanding, a child's life and the developmental, like almost appropriateness of explaining the different kinds of emotions and especially the scarier ones like grief? What are kind of the age groups or the, I guess, different levels of processing and understanding that a child can begin to, I guess, take in the thoughts of grief and these scarier emotions they don't really interact too much? Does that make sense? What I'm
Yeah, so I think people are afraid sometimes to share their own emotions and tears in front of their children. They want to protect them from the, you know, bigger, scarier things in life, which I get. And at the same time, when somebody is doing that, they're really taking away a teaching opportunity.
Mhm.
So I will always encourage people to share their emotions in front of their kids, even from the earliest ages, even during infancy. It's not too young to share, shedding of a tear. And I've had I've had toddlers pick up on the emotions of their parents, or my own children have picked up on my emotions when I've had a tear fall from my eye, and they'll come over and they'll give a hug and say, I've had the very hilarious response of, "Why does your face look like that?"
Huh?
Yeah, yeah, they have a very blunt way
Yeah.
of, picking up on these details. Or, "Why are you crying, mom?" Or, they're picking up on these little details, and they're trying to put the puzzle pieces together. And for the youngest of kids, we can keep it really simple. We can say, "I'm feeling really sad right now," or "I'm missing so and so," or "I'm having a really tough day." And, there might be a one sentence follow up to really, explore that a little bit deeper as kids are getting a little bit older. But we can keep it simple. We don't have to have this big complex monologue about what's going on in our inner world, and that wouldn't be developmentally appropriate. But
Mhm.
we can share a simple sentence about what it is that we are feeling. And what that does in the long term is it teaches children that it is okay to open up about their own feelings, and we should be creating the opportunity to let this out, because that's so much, healthier than keeping it inside.
I love that you said that we should keep it developmentally appropriate with our amount of detail that we go into for our feelings. I feel like there is a fear, it seems. I'm not a parent. My sister has a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I've noticed so much reparenting in myself just by watching how I want to be to them and try not to pass on the things that, were done, not done to me, but the way that I was raised, and being mindful of how much emotion I share and helping them to understand their emotions when they're going through them when I'm with them. And there is, even as an aunt, there is a tiny bit of a fear that, like, oh my God, am I saying a little too much? Like, there was a day where my nephew caught me crying, and I was just overwhelmed with thinking about my father that had passed and, like, how much he would enjoy being around them. And, we were watching one of those movies with all of the songs in it singing, and they were singing Bohemian Rhapsody, and that was one of my dad's favorite
Mhm.
songs, and he loved Queen. And the fact that my nephew, who's now 4, is running around the room singing this song and thinking, like, God, man, like, such a cool moment that could have happened. And, now to see him tearing up in this moment, and
Yeah.
I was happy watching it, but he couldn't understand the happy face and the tears.
Yeah. And you could just simply say, "I'm feeling really sad that your grandpa wasn't able to see this moment or be in this moment with you because you might not know this, but he loved that song.
Yeah.
And it makes me happy to hear this song and sad at the same time. And it's okay to have happy and sad feelings at the same time." And that's how you can make it short, concise, and developmentally appropriate without, going into all the details that,
Yeah.
you know, they might not really care to hear.
Right, or even understand. And I think it's, in that fear of a parent not knowing what to say, man, you really do unlock a lot of faith in themselves for just keeping it simple, because everyone can keep it simple. And you don't want to alarm anyone, but you do want to be real in a way
Mhm.
that, they can understand that there is something going on. Because I think you said that, they're going to pick up on what your face is doing, and the perceptiveness of a child. Like, they literally need to dissect every single one of your reactions to survive. That's like a developmental thing that we all have that can lead us to, fill in the blanks if we aren't being told what exactly is going on. So
Yeah,
could you
that's
give
the
us a
thing. Yeah, and I would love to elaborate on that a little bit with the filling in the blanks because when children are not given the information about why certain emotions are coming up, the youngest of children often will fill in those blanks in the wrong way and fill in this meaning of, oh, maybe I caused those emotions, or young children are often very egocentric. A lot of times that will come back on, oh, I wonder if I did this wrong or if I caused XYZ to happen. So it's so helpful for them to have this very simple explanation about what is going on, so it doesn't go to that place of misconceptions and extra anxiety and fears forming.
Could you tell us a little bit about your career and how you got into becoming a certified child life specialist, and just kind of where you started this desire to want to help in
Yeah,
this manner?
sure. So I started out in my college career as a nursing major, and I was really torn between the healthcare profession and also this interest in teaching. I had grown up teaching swim lessons, and I was really torn between those two. So while I was in my nursing degree, I took an intro to education course, and one professor really changed the whole trajectory for me because they told me, have you ever heard of the field of child life? This is the perfect blend of these two professions because you in a way are um, a teacher in like the medical environment where you are helping children understand what is happening. You're reducing fears related to their medical experience or their healthcare experience. And I was like, whoa, that's it. That is what I want to do exactly, because it really does blend those two passions quite beautifully.
Yeah.
So I started my career in a pediatric intensive care unit, specifically with pediatric cardiac patients, and then went to a general ICU. And I floated around to several different places within the hospital setting. And then after going through my own personal loss story with several pregnancy losses and the stillbirth of my little girl Maggie, I really found myself gravitating towards providing wanting to provide grief support to families like my own, because what I realized was there's some great support in the hospital setting,
Mhm.
but once you leave the hospital doors, there is not a lot out there to help support you through that time. I also realized there are a lot of families that never even enter the hospital
Mhm.
and they are grieving, and there was such a missing piece of support, and I really wanted to make sure that families were getting the support that they needed after these life-changing experiences, because it's something that nobody should ever have to handle on their own. It's just such an isolating time, even though it's such a universal experience. It also feels like you are the only one going through this, which is such a strange dichotomy to really think about. But I really wanted to be able to help fill some of those holes and those gaps.
Goodness, and thank goodness for this even being an industry to begin with. I mean, I personally have never heard of it, and I'm rather surprised I haven't because there's such a need for this expertise and this level of support. I think I have a very unique we all have very unique grief stories, but mine started when I was 12 when my father was diagnosed. He was given 30 days to live, and he lived for another 25 years, miraculously, but very ill the entire time. And as an adult, when he finally passed, I fell into a void of almost not like I needed a guidebook. I needed someone to lead a path for me because it felt very dark and I had no flashlight. I was just like,
Yeah.
what the hell is next? Holy crap, I do not know what's going on. And I cannot fathom being a child when that
Mhm.
happened
Yeah.
and what absolute stupor of an existence they would be in for quite some time. Not to mention their brain needing to rewire that the person that was important to them is gone. That took me a year and I was an adult and I was confused by the confusion, the lack of memory, the just brain changes that were happening from the
For sure.
intense feelings. And
And I'm
I
sure there was
wonder,
a lot of grief related to your experience of that diagnosis at age 12, and there's so much anticipatory grief, and there's a whole lot of grief related to all the changes I'm sure that you experienced as almost a teenager
yeah,
during that time too.
a very developmental time where instead of being able to, start to pull away a little bit as a 12-year-old, I became a full-time caretaker while my mother had to go to work now because my dad was ill. It just was a complete change of life. And it was, there was hide nor hair an adult that would ever have a conversation with me about what was going on outside of my father, let
Yeah.
alone someone acknowledging like what you're feeling is depression, what you're feeling is grief, what you're
Mhm.
feeling is an overwhelming amount of sadness that you don't know how to navigate because you don't even know what it is. And it took, I think, until about a month ago for me to even hear the term anticipatory grief. But it brings me, I won't think about it too deeply, but it brings me such solace to know that children have these tools now because of people like you. And I know that my life happened the exact way it was supposed to, but my God, I could have really used some help and I could have used
Yeah.
someone to just share
Yeah.
something with me to let me know I wasn't alone because it felt very, very scary and alienating.
Yeah.
It's what really drew me so much to your work because it's one of the hardest conversations to have with yourself, let alone with a child. And I can't imagine being responsible for that conversation as a parent. And the work you're doing is just the ripple effect will be untold. But please know you're changing so many souls, so many lives just by giving them, you know, the ability to be seen through the pages of your work and the things that you've created to support
Yeah.
children.
Thank you
I
so
would,
much for sharing that. That means so much to hear just the impact of my work and others who are helping childhood grievers, because it is just such a heavy load with kids not knowing, their why they're grieving, what's going on, putting some labels to those emotions and putting some language to whatever the background is, whether it is a diagnosis or an accident or an illness, whatever that is. It's helpful for kids to know and be able to begin to process that so that they're not carrying this heavy weight inside of them that eventually they'll unpack as an adult if and when, their body decides to get that grief out in other ways. Because if it's not expressed outwardly, eventually it will come out in ways that you probably don't want it really coming out, just very physical manifestations of the
Yeah.
grief.
My goodness. Yes, and the ripple effect of that, I think the giving children the autonomy to navigate their emotions, not only navigate them, but be able to anticipate them, feel them coming, know that, like, oh, I'm feeling a little off. And I've been
Mhm.
feeling a little sad. And now I'm starting to not want to clean my room and my homework feels hard.
Yeah.
Maybe I should talk to my mom or dad about this. And those were conversations that until recently I don't think were even thought about, let alone given the true respect that it deserves, because I think parents are doing their absolute very best. They've always been doing their absolute very best, but there are cracks. And I think sometimes the cracks come thinking that parents, it seems they're almost always worried about the outside world and the outside effects, the bills, the job they need to keep. Let's get you to school, let's do this, let's do that. And I think there is a lot to be said, especially through your work, of giving parents the tools that they need just to discuss emotions with their child, and knowing that in discussing those emotions, which may take 5 minutes a day to do here and there a couple times a week, they're providing them with the groundwork to live such a successful, happy, well adjusted life, we can hope, right? If they give them the tools of being able to emotionally understand themselves and support themselves.
Yeah, these are life skills. They're, taking that time. If parents and adults don't feel like they have the words, there are such beautiful resources that literally hand you the words. There are books
Yeah.
out there that will give you the language and be a conversation starter. So it doesn't have to be this big, looming, scary, like, I don't know how to start this conversation. It can be reading a book and then the conversation has already started and there is this beautiful window for the child to take it where it needs to go. Because ultimately, if it's coming up in an organic way for the child, that is so much more powerful than these conversations that are being led entirely by an adult.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I would love to, if you're comfortable, talk a little bit about what your loss of your children has kind of done for you. I've spoken to a number of people on the show that have had an incredible thing happen in their life that led to grief. And oftentimes it seems that they also find a little bit of light in that grief that leads to their finding a new purpose for their life. And I love your story so much because it seems like that might have been what happened for you. So could you give us a
Yeah,
little bit about that part of your life?
it really did. So I know not everybody feels like they have some like big meaning from their loss situation. There doesn't always have to be. And sometimes that meaning can take place in ways that are, either you define as smaller or they're longer down the road. They might not be right away. But for me, each one of my losses felt entirely different. I went through several first trimester pregnancy losses. I feel like there was the very first one, I was like, oh, this thing happens, everything's fine. And then each one got a little bit harder. It was like this exponential grief and loss that came on top of the other one. And it wasn't really until after our pregnancy loss with our daughter Maggie, she died 22 weeks into my pregnancy. That first month, my husband and I feel like we were just lumps on the couch. We had a toddler at home at the time that we had to pick ourselves up every single day. We had to get up, make sure that our toddler was taken care of, the meals prepped, all the daily living things. So we couldn't necessarily just be on the couch. But I remember we spent a lot of time there just talking, checking in with one another. And there was this one night where we kind of came to this place together where we decided, We can either keep this story kind of tucked close into our hearts and not really say much about it, do much about it, or we can use our story as almost like a window into or a door into change. And sharing our story will hopefully invite others to share their own story. We had this deep desire to do something positive with our story. So we decided on the ladder and started running some charity projects so that we could raise money in order to give back to our hospital that we had our daughter at. And we've done some really, really beautiful things there. We've raised enough money to purchase a, have you heard of a cuddle cot? No, it's this cot that essentially cools a baby after they were either stillborn or if they died shortly after birth. It really preserves their body for as long as you need it so that you can spend more time with your child after they have died. So we purchased a cuddle cot for our local hospital, a professional camera so people could get really beautiful pictures of their child and those precious moments that you will, that's all you have. And then we've also been slowly raising enough money to create a whole respite room for the hospital so that people can have all the time that they want and need with their child. Because one of the things that we experienced was we felt we felt rushed out of the hospital after having her. I was discharged out of the hospital 9 hours after I delivered her, which is not enough time physically, not enough time emotionally. I would have liked to at least spent a full 24 hours with her. And I didn't get that time because they needed my room for another laboring mom. And I don't want anybody else to have that experience. There are some people that want to leave as soon as they can, and that is totally fine. But I was not ready to leave the hospital. And I wanted to make sure that no other family felt rushed out of those doors because that's the only time that we had with her. And I wish that we had, you know, a few more hours or 12 more hours and creating some of those memories with her. It just would have been really beautiful to be able to have that extra time.
Beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
I am just away by your take savory parts of what was already unsavory time and to make sure that doesn't happen for another family again, at least in your hospital. And my God, what a beautiful, beautiful to another parent and to another mother to make sure that they get these moments that will be the last moments that they get to have with their the photos especially, and then being done with a good camera. Like, it's just think about these little things and how much they matter until they're all that you have left. And I am just so blown away by this and your empathy and wanting to make sure that what doesn't happen to someone else again. And that's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, because it really is. It's the worst thing that anybody can imagine going through. And then you want to make the most of that time that you have with them. So I feel like in my position as a child life specialist, I actually had kind of a privilege in a way because I had been through supporting so many other families with their own losses before it was me on the other side. So I knew of some of the things that I could do. I did 3D molds of her hands and her feet, so I have those to hold. And I took all the pictures and I spent so much time with her and brought my son in to meet her. And there are all these things that I did that I don't know if I would have known to have done that if I hadn't had the experience of walking so many other families through this before it was my turn to walk through this. And it's yeah, it's a lot.
And I'm such a full circle person, and I think it's so incredibly beautiful that you went into this direction of a career that allowed you to help future you in a way
Yeah.
that made such a difficult, terrible time a little bit more control over. And wow, what a blessing that must have been like in the moment to know, like, okay, a foresight here into what I need to do. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I know that this is important to me and this is important to me, and I'm going to focus on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Brought up and of bringing your son to meet his sister. And as I said, and I can't imagine what that process is like, but what that decision process for you? He was old enough at the time to know he had a sister coming, and I'm sure that
Mhm.
led to a number of conversations that you had to have with him. But what decision process like for you in making that decision for them to meet?
Yeah. So for him, he was 19 months at the time. He had been to all of my appointments. He saw all the ultrasounds. He was a part of every step of the way. He talked to my belly at that time. He would just lift my shirt up and talk to his sister and be like, "Hey, there's a squirrel outside," and like just the most nonsensical stories, but to him it was really important. So when we realized that I would be going to the hospital to deliver her and that she would be dead when I delivered her, I realized this is huge for him. He's going to need the opportunity to see her, to have this very concrete view of she was here in the world, and I got to say hello and goodbye to her because at his toddler age, things are very abstract. If I went home from the hospital without that opportunity for him to meet her, he might not totally get it. And there was still room for that to occur, but he did get it. He never once lifted my shirt up to talk to my belly afterwards. He knew that that's not where she was anymore. He had the chance to meet her, to hold her, and from that day on he talked to her in like talking to the sunset and the sunrises because we told him that that's how we felt really connected to her, because on the day that she died it was the most gorgeous pinks and purples in the sky, and that felt like her little, hello and goodbye to us. So now when we see the beautiful skies, they call it the Maggie skies. They're like, "Oh, look, it's a Maggie sky today." So that was something that was really meaningful, to make sure that he knew that she was here. And also at his age, I knew that there was a chance he would never remember this. So getting pictures of the two of them together was really important. And he looks at those pictures from time to time now. He's 9 now, and he looks at them and he knows that he was there, and he kind of rubs it in his younger sister's face that she was not there and he was, siblings. But that was really important to him. And he'll tell me that he remembers going there and seeing her and visiting. I'm not sure if he does or if that's just a memory of the picture. But even if it is just a memory of the picture, that is now a memory he has, even if that didn't carry over from his 19, 20-month memory that he once had.
So many things. I think it's to in that moment get really overwhelmed, and I love that from the loss of Maggie and you not having as much time with her as you have and would have wanted, and to create resources for others to help them through this time and so much to help others, but for you to create these two books and countless other resources that you say help you to feel closer and closer to Maggie every time you create one, which is just
Yeah, thank you.
us about the books that you've written to help children cope with loss,
Yeah,
grief, and their feelings, and links in the show notes to grab all of this. So don't go Googling, just listen and we'll make sure you have the link later to purchase. But tell us about your books
sure.
and your resources.
Yeah, so I have two books that are fully published right now, one more that is on the way and will be published in a couple months that is in pre-order. But the books that I have published right now, Forever Connected is the first book, and that's specifically for bereaved siblings. And my second book is The ABCs of Grief, and that's for grief of all types, death losses, non-death losses. So it really opens it up to help children explore what grief is and what comes up with grief. There are certainly some emotional pieces that come up, some physical pieces that come up. Really, it's as if you got a an adult book on what is grief, but simplified into the most concrete, simplistic information that you could get out there. And I've heard a lot of teens and adults saying, I don't have kids, but I bought this book for myself because it makes it just clicks. It makes sense. It's easy to understand and it's validating. And then the next book that is to come out is in the same series. It's the ABC's Emotions and Feelings, and that's in pre-order right now. And that book really goes through all the nuanced feelings and emotions that come up with grief, because it is complicated, it is layered, it is not just sadness, it is not just the love and longing. There are so many complicated emotions that can come up and contradictory emotions that can all happen all at the same time. So it explores all of that, and all of the ABCs of grief books follow an alphabet. So it's very relatable for children because that's, just one of the many ways that books can really resonate for children is following an alphabet and really simplifying the topic. But yeah, and then there's one more to come after that. So in about a year, we'll be talking about the third book in the ABCs of Grief series. So,
That so much. And I would love to have you back on when the next book comes out. Guys, we'll put the
yeah,
link in the show notes for the pre-orders. You can absolutely grab that. Um, I think I would miss if I didn't ask parent can do for their child right now if their child is suffering from the anxiety that comes with loss and maybe thinking, is this going to happen to you? Is this going to happen to you? I've suffered through that and was just afraid of everyone I ever house plants. I was afraid of dying. Like it went everywhere. So is there any support a parent can provide to a child that is since dealt with a loss and is now very fearful of everyone else they love passing?
yeah. That's a very real thing that comes up for grievers, both young and older, is that anxiety that comes afterwards. And it's definitely a part of that grief experience. Is you have these worries that did not exist before. And the validation of, yeah, I can see why you are thinking that, of worrying about that. I worry about those things too. Just validating it. And instead of dismissing it and being like, oh, I'll be fine. I'm young. I'm healthy. That doesn't really help. You can give that information after some validation and say, you know, some of those same things with the chances of something bad happening are very, very low, but I can totally understand why you are thinking and feeling that, because things have felt very out of control and things happen that really we feel like it shouldn't have happened, but that is how life happens sometimes. But ultimately, I'd say one of the best things is to find support, whether that is one-on-one support, a grief camp, a support group. There's going to be different things that work for different kids. So, you might have to try a bunch of different things out to see what works for them. But I'd say find them support, especially because kids often are not telling the full story to their caregivers. So there might be some things that are kind of sitting within them that they feel either too scared to tell their caregiver, or they don't want to put any additional burden on them. So they'll keep it within. So yeah, just find that additional support for them. And if anybody does need that support, I can certainly provide that through my private practice. If anybody is needing that, I see families all over the country and even some international families as well through virtual support. So there's there is support out there for sure.
A link in the show notes for that. And bless the internet for things like digital therapy.
Yeah.
Thank God. I always ask my guests the same question at the end of the episode, and it is this: Jessica, how do you make your life rich?
Gosh, wow, that is such a big question. I think it could be just the simple moments. I think sometimes those are the moments that are the most powerful. It's catching that sunrise in the morning that connect me to Maggie, or seeing the joy in my kids' faces when they have this, achievement, or they're going through something tough and they finally have like some sort of moment of overcoming their difficult times. It's those little moments. Those are the moments that really I go back to whenever I'm having my own hard days. So I think it's the little things.
Jessica, for sharing your story today and for all of your work. And can I see what is to come from you and just the thousands upon thousands of lives you're already helping and will continue to be helping in the future. So thank you for everything. And guys, check out all the links in the show notes. There'll be a ton. A beautiful book to grab a couple of each and have on hand, because you're always going to know someone at some point that is going to be experiencing and loss. And this is just a beautiful way to provide support in a time where there's really not much else you can do. And a book is a beautiful gift to give, and you can visit it in a time that works best for them, and it'll be when they open the page. So, Jessica, for this
Thanks for having
conversation
me, Sarah.
today. And thanks, guys, for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you.